Do you want to speed up the close, convert your sales faster, generate more relationships, more leads than you ever have before? There's some words you're going to want to avoid if you want to sell more and sell faster. I'm going to walk you through the 30 words that you'll want to stay away from. In fact, you'll want to avoid them. I would have said like the plague, but let's say like a virus in order to be more effective in sales. And make sure you watch the whole video because there's a bonus tip at the end I'm going to include. Hey, I'm Shawn Casemore, and I help you learn how to be a high-performing sales professional so that you can earn more money faster. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure you hit the like button on this video and subscribe so you get notified each and every time I release a new video. You know, success in sales is all about a language. It's the words you use, the phrases you use, it's how you ask questions. And you've probably been told a lot about what kind of words you should use. Words like you and us, right? Inviting the buyer into your world and the product and the service that you're trying to sell. But has anybody ever talked to you about the words you don't want to use? The words you want to avoid? I'm going to walk you through 30 words you're going to want to avoid. I'll even give you some examples because those words tend to create a negative environment and they don't help you. In fact, they hinder you when it comes to moving your sale forward. Let's jump right in to that list. Okay, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly and I've kind of grouped them together so that they make sense for you and that you can make some notes as we go. So let's start with this. When you're talking or referring to the buyer, when you're referring to yourself, maybe even referring to a competitor, you want to avoid 3 different words. Number 1, I, because remember the buyer doesn't care about you, which is I, they care about themselves. So don't talk about I do this and I do that, right? Secondly, don't talk about they. They suggest that you're isolating yourself from somebody else. So if you're talking about a competitor, say one of our competitors. Don't say they, okay? If you're talking about a client, talk about the client. Don't talk about they. It's too depersonalized. And along the same lines as I, don't say me, right? Number 1, that's just in most cases bad grammar, but number 2, it's just a word, again, that focuses on you and not the buyer. We want to flip that around. All right, now I'm going to talk about words that you may bring up during the sales conversation. Okay, again, and I'll give you examples of why you shouldn't use these, all right? So, in no particular order, let's get started. Honestly. If you use the word honestly, and I find some people it becomes a habit. You know, they're saying something like, well, honestly, let me tell you about this, or let me be honest with you. Well, if you say that, it suggests that you might not be honest.
A liar.
A liar.
Or that at other times in the conversation you weren't honest. So avoid the word honest or honestly. Trust me, just like honestly or honest, you shouldn't have to tell them to trust you. Okay? Trust is something you build, so don't suggest they need to trust you. You're going to have to earn it. Problem. You don't want to talk about problems, right? A lot of times sales training is about my solution that solves your problem. Well, we don't want to suggest that the buyer has a problem because they're dealing with it, so it must be survivable at this point. So don't use the word problem. Talk more about solutions, opportunities, and options. Again, notice these words focus instead of the negative, we want to focus on the positive. Okay, here's a couple phrases I hear a lot. We can't, there's one, or we won't, or we shouldn't. The we is okay, but can't, won't, shouldn't, all negative connotations. You shouldn't do that. We can't do that for you. You don't want to do that. Again, all very negative words that really take the buyer down a path of us telling them what they should be doing or how they should be thinking. And that's not what this is about, right? Sales is about building trust and building a relationship. If you're asking me for my advice, that's one thing. But if I'm in a sales conversation, I don't want to be so explicit because usually I don't know what's behind that. So saying you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, those are words I want to stay away from. Okay, here's a couple words I hear a lot. Dream. You can dream about that, or that's something I often dream of. You want to stay away from dream. Nobody wants a dreamer when they're in a sales conversation. They want value, and the word dream just doesn't belong in any situation. Unless maybe you're selling a dream vacation. There's the one exception. Other than that, I don't necessarily know what my buyers are dreaming of, so I'm not going to use that word. Cheap. We're cheap. We're the cheapest out there. We're cheaper than the competition. Nobody wants to buy anything that's cheap, right?
Welcome to discount prices. I've got $1.99. I've got $7.99. I've got $16.99. Cheap prices. $14. $11. $2.49.
They want good, high quality products or services. So don't use the word cheap. If you have to talk about the fact that your price is lower than the competition, I would say our pricing is competitive or our pricing is some of the best in the market, but I would not say we're cheap. Along the way of cheap, don't talk about low cost, right? Again, we want to make sure when we're having a sales conversation, we're setting the buyer up for the discussion when it comes to our price. So we don't want them to have in their mind that we're cheap or we're low cost, because when we do present the price, no matter what it is, it's going to be too high. So don't talk about low cost. You can talk about lowering their costs. That's a different thing. But don't say we're a low cost solution for you, because again, it cheapens your solution, your product, your service, which is something we don't want to do before we actually present price. New. New is a word that you want to avoid in sales conversations, because why? Well, because if you're new, I'm kind of scared to use your product or service, right? Because anything new suggests it's unproven. And I don't know if I want to invest in something that's unproven. So stay away from using the word new if at all possible. Negative. We're talking about staying away from negative words, but along the same lines, don't use the word negative. You might say something like, well, there's some negative views on this in the marketplace, right? But notice when I say that, it immediately makes you cringe a little bit, because negative words, including the word negative, move us in the direction of not an optimistic, positive conversation, but one that is more negative. So we want to stay away from using negative words, including the word negative itself. Along those same lines, risk. Now, you're going to run into buyers who are concerned about risk. If you're selling somebody financial services, risk might be something that you sell. You're going to help them reduce risk. Okay, but I don't like using the word risk if I can. Here's why. How do I know what's risky for my buyer, right? Each buyer has their own business, their own metrics, their own strategy, right? They've even got their own personality. Some people are more risk adverse than others, for example. So just because I think it's a risk doesn't mean my buyer does. And as soon as I talk about risk, I can create fear. Remember that in your conversations, your buyers aren't necessarily hearing every single thing you're saying. If you're having a conversation and speaking at a pace that I am right now, you're really just picking up certain words, right? So you don't want the word risk to jump into their mind and they say, hold on a second, did he say this is risky? Uh-oh, I don't want to be part of that. Or did he say this is new? Uh-oh, is that something I want to be part of? So I would try to avoid the word risk, unless what you're selling is risk-adverse services. Here's a word I hear from a lot of younger salespeople. When they sometimes talk about situations that maybe their product or service have solved. So they share an example about a client situation and they say horrible. My client was in a horrible situation, or the situation was horrible. I don't like the word horrible. That's kind of my bias. But again, it has such negative connotations. And what I deem horrible, you might think is not that big a deal. So keep the word horrible out of your sales conversations. The next group of words are words that often come up when you're talking about or discussing your company, all right? So let's talk about some of those words. Now, they could come up at other times, but specifically they come up a lot of times when you're kind of presenting the history of your company. So let's start with those. Using the word obviously. I find that word comes up a lot as more of a habit for some people. Well, obviously this and obviously that. And it's a word that people say without really thinking about it sometimes. You want to remove that word from your vocabulary because, like I've said in the previous or with the previous words, it might not be so obvious to your buyer. So saying obviously doesn't really make sense. And it can suggest that your buyer is kind of dumb.
Radio? Who needs a radio? Ready, Harry?
And we don't want to do that, right? Because if I say, well, obviously, and they go, well, it wasn't so obvious to me, I've made them feel in a different, mode or mood than I'd like them to. So stay away from the word obviously. Advice. Obviously, I'm going to give you some advice. Ugh, right? Don't give them advice. If you're being paid to offer advice, that's one thing. Maybe that makes sense. But when it comes to dealing with your buyer, talking about your company, talking about even your solution or product, don't say, let me give you some advice. I've heard salespeople say that, and it makes me shudder because I'm not being paid to give advice. What if I tell the buyer something that ends up being untrue or it causes them some sort of harm? I don't want to give advice. I'm going to give you ideas. I'm going to give you options. I'm going to give you opportunities. But advice, unless you're paying for it, is not something I'm going to offer. How about the word maybe? Have you ever said maybe to a buyer? Well, maybe that's something we can do. Maybe I can solve that for you. Most buyers I've met don't like the word maybe. It's too vague. They want commitment. They want action. They want a positive direction forward. So when you say maybe, they're thinking, well, is it a yes or a no? So my bias is keep the word maybe out of your sales conversations. Similar to the word maybe, what about seriously? Well, seriously, I think we can do this for you. Or seriously, we don't want to use the word seriously. Another negative word, or at least can provide or have negative connotations in the eyes of our buyer. Seriously suggests that we don't think you're serious.
You serious?
Well, I take every buyer that I have ever talked to as serious. Anything they say to me is serious. In fact, maybe sometimes I take it too serious. So I don't use the word seriously, and I'd suggest you do the same. You know, in sales, there's two things that we're really trying to do. We're trying to influence our buyer or the group of people who are looking at our product or service, right? And we're trying to persuade them to make a decision. We're using a combination of influence and persuasion. That's part of sales. Well, that is the case. You and I both know it. We don't need to tell the buyer that. We don't need to say something like, let me influence you to use our product or service. Or can I persuade you to try this out? If you bring those words up, what they really suggest is that we're trying to influence and persuade. And I don't know about you, but the last time somebody tried that on me, I wasn't really pleased. So stay away from using the words influence or the word persuade. Have you ever said sorry to a buyer? Maybe you made a mistake. You made an error, they corrected you on something, and you said, sorry. You don't want to use the word sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about. If you made a mistake, okay, right? You could say something instead like, you raise a good point, or, oh, I missed that. But sorry puts you in a position where you're inferior, at least I believe so, to the buyer. And you're not. You're equal partners trying to come up with a solution together. So use the word sorry when you're maybe speaking with your spouse or significant other or your children, but don't bring it in to your sales conversations. No. Do I have to bring this up? Don't use the word no. If they say, well, can you do this for us? You say, no, we really can't do that. Can you discount it? No, we can't discount it.
It's definitely a no for me, dog.
Simply, if you get in a situation where it seems like saying no makes sense, what I want you to do instead is simply repeat back the question the buyer asked. So if they say to you, can you discount it? Don't say, no, we can't discount it. You could say, here's a couple options. You could repeat the question back and say to them, can I discount it? Well, let me take this back and I'll speak with my boss and we'll see what we can come up with, even if you can't discount it. But instead of saying no, repeat back the question you heard to make sure it's correct, which will also allow you time to think about a good response other than the word no. Ridiculous. Ridiculous is something you save for when you're having fun with your friends, but it's not a word you want to use in sales. Because why? The word's ridiculous. It's a silly word. And again, it takes you away from the professionalism of what you're trying to project when it comes to selling. Easy. Now this one's a little bit tricky because you might say, well, part of the value of our product or service is that it's easy to use. That's great. But what might be easy to you might not be easy to somebody else. I've sat and listened to pitches of my coaching students and they talk about how easy their solution is, but when I take a look at it and I start asking questions, I realize this isn't so easy. So remember, you define easy, maybe, differently than what your buyer defines it. So I don't want to do that. It also devalues what I'm trying to sell. As soon as I say this is easy, the buyer goes, well, great. If it's easy, it's got to be cheap. And those are two words that we want to stay away from. Here's the last one I have for you in this section, commission. Even if you're paid a commission, we don't need to be talking to our buyer about it. I've never met a buyer, even when I was 100% commission in my earlier sales roles, I've never met a buyer that said, look, you need to make some money, let me buy this so you get your commission, right? If they want to talk about my commission, that's up to them. But I never talk about commission because it's not something that the buyer wants to hear. Again, we have to keep reinforcing this is about our buyer and putting our buyer's best interests, right, forward. Presenting to the buyer, adding value to the buyer, helping the buyer solve their situation or helping them bring them new opportunities that they're looking for. So my commission has nothing to do with the buyer, and I'd leave that word right out of your sales conversations. If you're enjoying these words I'm going through and the examples I'm sharing, make sure you click like on this video and click the subscribe button so you get notified each and every time I release a new video. You can also comment below with other negative words that you try to avoid each and every time you're in a sales conversation. Okay, one final word for you and then a little bit of a bonus tip that I mentioned at the start. If you're trying to sell something to somebody, you might be doing a pitch or you might refer to it as a pitch. Never use the word pitch, right? Because it takes buyers a lot of times back to the old days of trying to buy a car or some bad experience they've had where somebody was trying to pitch them. And that negative experience, we don't want to bring that back. So even if you internally use the word pitch, don't bring it up in front of your buyer. Really, a pitch is something you do in baseball, not when you're trying to sell. So leave the word out of it because there's a risk it'll bring up some negative emotions or such with your buyer that you really don't want to bring up. So here is my bonus tips for you. Slang words, don't use them. Even if your buyer is, don't bring slang into the conversation. It deprofessionalizes you. So again, even if your buyer starts to use slang words, avoid them at all costs. stay professional, right? Sales is a profession and you want to look professional. Last but not least, if you have acronyms you use internally, keep them out of your sales conversations, because 10 to 1, your buyer has no idea what you're talking about. So you have to make sure you isolate. Acronyms are for internal talk, not external buyer-facing talk. All right, hope you've enjoyed this video. One thing I wanted to mention to you before you go too far on down to the next video, if you're looking for a tool to help you stay on track with your sales, I've created what I call the 30-day action planner for sales professionals. There's a link below. You can grab it. There's no obligation. There's no cost at all, but I think you'll find it'll help you stay on track with your activities. So make sure you click that link below. If you're trying to become a high-performing sales professional, you need to learn how to influence. Watch this video next for some great strategies on how to influence your buyer without using the word, by the way, and you will be able to elevate your sales and sell more faster. Till next time, get out there and let's go sell something, shall we?